Okay, thanks very much. Welcome, everybody. I am Dave Cullen. I am a policy fellow at BASIC and the program manager of the Emerging Voices Network. Welcome to this expert masterclass. It's great to have you with us. Just to let all of you know that the call will be recorded and posted on the BASIC website afterwards, but only speakers will be in the recording. That out of the way, I am delighted to introduce Jørn Osmundsen from the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He's had a long career at the ministry. He's currently Special Envoy on Disarmament Affairs, but he is shortly to move to Vienna to be a councillor at the Norwegian mission there. So we wish him well with that. But he is now going to give a masterclass on science and diplomacy and disarmament verification. Thanks very much. Over to you, Jørn.
Thank you for the introduction, and also thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity to talk about. I'm gonna especially talk about nuclear disarmament verification, but also a little bit in general on Norwegian disarmament policies and also on the importance of science diplomacy. So I have a PowerPoint, so I will try to share that one, and then we can just start right ahead. So just a moment here. Okay, it looks good. You can all see it.
Absolutely, thanks.
Yeah, right. So the overall topic today will be multilateral nuclear disarmament verification. But I will also start a little bit by introducing Norway's policies on nuclear disarmament in general. And then I will focus more on the work on nuclear disarmament verification, go a little bit on the technical work, but also, and especially, use most of the time on the multilateral processes on nuclear disarmament verification. And then in the end, I will also put it kind of in the setting of science diplomacy and why science diplomacy is important and matters. So I'm the Special Envoy for Disarmament Affairs at the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And Norway have had a consistent engagement for nuclear disarmament for many years, for many decades. So it has always been a policy priority for Norway, regardless of which government we have, to work for nuclear disarmament and to work towards the goal of a world free of nuclear weapons. Our current government is in its fourth year, so we will have general elections in September. But in the political platform of our government, it says that Norway will increase the efforts for nuclear disarmament and take initiative to focus on the humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons. So this has been a strong priority for us to make sure that nuclear disarmament is on the international agenda and that we are a strong voice to promoting work on nuclear disarmament. And of course also on the humanitarian consequences. So we have kind of for the last 3 years have had 5 priorities in our work. That is nuclear disarmament verification, which as I said, we'll talk more about today. We have also had quite a lot of work on irreversibility in nuclear disarmament within the NPT context. And that is a strong cooperation with United Kingdom and other partners. We have also been supporting on efforts for risk reduction, especially in these times. We think that this is really important. Norway is part of the Stockholm Initiative for nuclear disarmament, and we have had a lot of efforts through the Stockholm Initiative on risk reduction. And then, of course, the humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons. Norway has had a long tradition. We had the first international conference on humanitarian consequences back in 2013 in Oslo. And the rationale behind this, is that we also need to see work on nuclear weapons from the humanitarian angle. and not just from a strategic dimension. So I think, you know, this way to discuss nuclear disarmament and nuclear weapons has been really important and powerful. And then, of course, we also highlight the importance of arms control. So we, you know, very much encourage all the nuclear weapon states to engage in discussion on arms control and strategic stability and so on, because we see that as a very important first step towards nuclear disarmament. Let me also just highlight our emphasis on the Non-Proliferation Treaty. It, as you all know, goes back to 1970 when it went into force. And, you know, it's often, you know, referred to as the cornerstone of the global disarmament and non-proliferation regime. That is a well-used phrase, but it's still, you know, true. And we really, you know, see that the NPT, you know, is so important for global security. It has been for 55 years. The non-proliferation pillar is, of course, important, but also the disarmament. After the Cold War, we had great reductions in nuclear weapons through bilateral agreements between the US and Russia. But even if that was bilateral, it is hard to imagine that this could have taken place without the NPT. So we think in that respect, the NPT has also been important for disarmament. Of course, we are not naive. We see that we are in a difficult situation now. It's for a disarmament diplomat, it's challenging days, but we still have to continue working, you know, and trying to take forward this agenda. And that is why, you know, we think that the work on verification is very important now, and we'll come back to that. But let me also highlight the third pillar of the NPT, which is the peaceful uses. And this is, I wouldn't say it's forgotten, but it's a very important pillar of the NPT. And we see this as a very important tool to work in for the Sustainable Development Goals. So we would like to see much more action on this side as well. So let me also just point out that the NPT 2010 Action Plan highlights 3 pillars or principles, is it, for disarmament, which is verifiability, irreversibility, and transparency. And we think, you know, it's really important to give content to these 3 principles. There has been a lot of work on verification, which I will talk about, and also transparency from other countries. But also irreversibility has been the principle where there has been least work. So that's why, together with the UK, we started a multilateral dialogue on that back in 2022, and we will report on that to the next review conference in 2026. So, but let's focus on nuclear disarmament verification, and I will try to kind of highlight why it's important and show, you know, what activities we have been undertaken, and all this, you know, having in the back head that this is really about science diplomacy. So why is nuclear disarmament verification important? You know, why can't we just look to the nuclear weapon states and encourage them to do agreements and sort out all the verifications elements themselves? I think, you know, first of all, it's important that the NPT recognizes that non-nuclear weapon states have a role to play in the verification of nuclear disarmament, and also the SSOD1, you know, the special session on disarmament from 1978. And this is an important instrument or document because it's kind of one of the only one that is universal within the field of nuclear disarmament. As you know, NPT is not universal. A few states are lacking. But, you know, this SSOD1 came through the UN, so it's a universal document. And it highlights that all states have the right to participate, and even, you know, an obligation, it says, in the work on nuclear disarmament, and they have a right to do this on equal footing. And I think this is an important point, you know, because if you are going to be able to participate on an equal footing, you need the capacities to do that. You need the capabilities. And nuclear disarmament verification is quite a technical exercise. And that's why, you know, we also think capacity building is very important, you know, within the field of nuclear disarmament verification. Of course, you know, a nuclear disarmament scenario would have a bearing on the security interest of all states. I think that is, you know, what is special with nuclear weapons, that this affects all states' security interests. So kind of all discussions, policies on nuclear disarmament have relevance for all states, I would say. And to develop kind of a multilateral institution for nuclear disarmament verification would be, you know, a very important instrument for reaching and maintaining a world without nuclear weapons. So if we compare on the non-proliferation side, we have the IEA, which verifies, you know, the non-diversion of nuclear materials. And the idea is that we need something similar on the disarmament side, so that, you know, when we have again a window of opportunity for nuclear disarmament, and hopefully we will go towards zero at some point, then we need a multilateral institution that all states can trust and have confidence in. And in addition, we also believe that this work on nuclear disarmament verification that we're doing is building trust and confidence between states, and thus, you know, contributes to a global nuclear threat reduction. So moving more over to the work that we have been doing on nuclear disarmament verification, it started back in 2007. And again, it was a cooperation with the UK. So that's the UK-Norway initiative from 2007. I will explain these more later, but just highlight, you know, the different kind of working activities. So from 2015, the UK-Norway initiative was expanded. So we had Sweden and the US joining us. And it was then you know, named to the Quad Nuclear Verification Partnership. But that is kind of just building on the work of the UK-Norway initiative. We also have the International Partnership on Nuclear Disarmament Verification. That's a US-led initiative that goes back to 2014 and is still working. And then multilaterally, we have the UN process, where we have had 2 UN groups of governmental experts. One in 2018-19 and one in 2022-2023. But I will talk more about this. And I start with the UK-Norway initiative. So as I said, this was established in 2007. I will not, you know, go into everything that's on the slide here, but I think, you know, what was important with the UK-Norway initiative was that it showed that a non-nuclear weapon state could take part in the work on nuclear disarmament verification without, you know, gaining access to any proliferative information, and without compromising, you know, security interests. So this was kind of the background for the initiative, to show that this is possible, and I think it made good progress in showing that. And there were kind of 3 areas of work that were especially focused on in the UK-Norway initiative. That is what we call managed access. That is, you know, how you can let inspectors into a facility without, you know, seeing stuff they, you know, shouldn't see. And then they also developed what they call an information barrier. So that is when you remove the nuclear material from a warhead, you need some kind of instrumentation to show that this has happened. But at the same time, you should not gain knowledge about this material because that would, could risk proliferation. So they developed a technical tool that they call the information barrier that manage this. And both these elements are really important because it shows, that it's possible to do inspection without gaining access to information you should not have information about or have access to. So to avoid any proliferation risk. And this also brought confidence in the verification process. So the UK-Norway initiative, just to sum up, has been important, because it was the first time that you saw this kind of a cooperation between a nuclear weapon state and a non-nuclear weapon state. So it has kind of paved the way for a lot of the cooperations that has been later on nuclear disarmament verification. Just a little bit on Quad. The Quad, as I said, building on the UK-Norway initiative, including Sweden and the US, started back in 2015. It has kind of worked in 2 phases. And what they do in both of the phases is that, first there is a lot of research and development, and then they do some trials and exercise. And I think what is important with Quad is that it's a very technical initiative. So it really goes into the details and the technicalities. And it's probably much too technical for a diplomat like me. But it's like a test bed, a real-life test bed for developing nuclear disarmament verification technologies, procedures, methodologies. And it has been really, really instrumental in that regard. So the first phase, which is called letterpress, reported to the review conference in 2022, as it ended up being. And the second phase, that is still ongoing, will report to the RevCon next year. Yes, I think I already mentioned this. I don't want to go more into this, but if you want to dig into the technicalities of the Quad, they have their own web page, so you can go in and look at it. Yeah, some lesson learned from the typewriter is that there is a need to further develop verification concepts and approaches that could contribute to the discussion on how treaty monitoring could be implemented in the real world. And there is also a need to develop the understanding and evaluation of technologies that support verification activities. So the point is there is a lot more work that needs to be done on the technical side of nuclear disarmament verification. And this means that, we still need to work quite a lot on this. Moving over to the international partnership, I just have this slide here, which is kind of famous, I would say. What the international partnership has done is it consists of 25-30 countries. It has now been working for 11 years. It's in its 3rd phase now. And what you can kind of see from this slide is that it has very much focused on the process of dismantlement, the process of nuclear disarmament. And it has been breaking it down to 14 different steps. And then there has been different work and activities on the different steps within the disarmament process. So the idea is that each step would require a different kind of verification activities. So that is kind of the thinking behind the work on IPNDV. And IPNDV has also produced a lot of material. They have their own webpage, and if you're interested in looking more into it, I would recommend going into their webpage. Then moving over to nuclear disarmament verification in the UN, which I have been mainly working with. So back in 2016, we saw the need, Norway, to take the work on nuclear disarmament verification and bring it into the UN to have, you know, the legitimacy from the UN to the work. So we had a first resolution in 2016, and we have had several later, but the first resolution established what we call a United Nations group of governmental experts on nuclear disarmament verification. And that first one was tasked to look at the role of verification in advancing nuclear disarmament. Later, there was a second, what we call GG, so a group of governmental experts, that went further in considering the issues connected to nuclear disarmament verification, and especially the concept of a GST, group of scientific and technical experts. I will come back to this. And I was privileged to be the chair of that group. And we have now this new initiative in the UN on the concept of a group of scientific and technical experts. I will come back to all this. So looking at the first GGE on nuclear disarmament verification, 2018, 2019, this was the first time that a UN entity considered the issue of nuclear disarmament verification. Typically, this group consists of 25 people, experts. They participate in a personal capacity, but they are all being nominated by a government. So there is, of course, a link to the country they are coming from. What was important with the first GD was that it reached a consensus final report in 2019, and it highlighted 7 principles for nuclear disarmament verification, and it also had some conclusion points that, you know, were consensus. And I have just highlighted 4 of these here, so that verification is essential in the process of nuclear disarmament and towards achieving a world without nuclear weapons. Also important is that credible verification regimes in which all states have confidence will be essential for maintaining a world without nuclear weapons. Also, confidence-building measures may complement nuclear disarmament verification arrangements between the implementing parties of a specific treaty. And very important, all states could contribute to aspects of nuclear disarmament verification, and no state is restricted from developing. So this is to highlight that this is work that all interested states, you know, could participate and, you know, bring insights to. I think that is very important because most states have some kind of insights that are, you know, relevant to this work. Moving over to the second GG, which worked between 2022 and 2023. It was, you know, tasked to build on the first GG, but also to look more into some specific issues. Again, 25 experts from all regions. And again, we managed to have a consensus final report. And I think, you know, that is very important from both the GGs because, you know, it's all there were 7 nuclear armed states in the group, both groups, so the P5 plus India and Pakistan. And then there were, you know, states from all regions of the world. So even if it was just 25, it was kind of representative of the whole world. And given, you know, the problems to find agreements on nuclear disarmament the last 10, 15 years, I think it's really important that these groups actually were able to find consensus and make recommendations and move forward on an issue related to nuclear disarmament. The second GG worked mainly on 3 main areas. So that was the conceptual issues, principles, definitions, concepts, scope, so on. Then it was discussions on capacity building, and then the concept of a group of scientific and technical experts. So on the conceptual side, actually, the GGE agreed on a working definition of nuclear disarmament verification, which is the first ever. I will not read it out, but just highlight some elements. That it's a process driven by states partying. It's about gathering and analyzing information. It's about enabling an assessment of compliance, and with our overarching goal of a world free of nuclear weapons. And then we also, discussed other conceptual issues like objectives, purposes, institutional arrangements, and governance, and of course the scope of nuclear disarmament verification. I also noted that was, like the IPNDV, there was a discussion on breaking down the disarmament process into processes, and kind of start a discussion on what is needed on the different levels of the disarmament, or context, as the concept we use, of the disarmament process. And what was highlighted here is that you have first the phase of reductions and limitations, and then you have a phase of going towards zero, and then you have a phase after where you are going to maintain zero. So these different contexts or phases of a disarmament process would probably require different kind of tool, techniques, methodologies, procedures for verification. Then on capacity building, we had a very long discussion on that, both on capacity building and the GSTE. We didn't find consensus in the group. So it has showed that on the more conceptual issues, it is possible to find consensus, but it has been more difficult to find consensus on the more practical work on nuclear disarmament verification. So even if for both capacity building and the GST, the main part of the group were supportive, there were also, experts in the group that didn't see the merit in this. So the group were not able to have consensus language, but there are lengthy, descriptions on the discussion in the group on these issues. I would also like to highlight that we also discussed cross-cutting issues like gender, youth, and education. Again, this GGE ended up with consensus conclusions and recommendation. I'm just going to pull out 3 conclusions and 1 recommendation. Again, that nuclear disarmament is an essential element of the nuclear disarmament verification is an essential element of the nuclear disarmament process. A second conclusion, there is value in considering general aspects of nuclear disarmament verification. I have highlighted this because it was a long discussion in the group, whether it makes sense to work on practicalities on nuclear disarmament verification before you have a treaty. So we at least got this formulation. And again, I think it's really important to highlight that non-nuclear weapon states have insights to offer on nuclear disarmament verification. This is not just a topic that nuclear weapon states can work with. And one of the recommendations is that, UN member states should continue to work on nuclear disarmament verification issues, which is important for the work that we are taking forward now. So last fall, at the UN First Committee, the UN General Assembly, Brazil and Norway tabled a resolution on nuclear disarmament verification and on the concept of a group of scientific and technical experts. This resolution had wide support. It is building on the work and discussions of the 2 GGE. It is kind of a logical next step because the GGEs had a lot of discussion on the conceptual side, as I've been describing, but I have not, progressed more on the practical work. So we believe there is now a strong conceptual multilateral foundation for more work on nuclear disarmament and more technical, practical work on nuclear disarmament verification within the UN. what we did with this resolution last year is to start like a consultation process within the UN. And in the resolution, it was highlighted that this consultation should focus on merits, objectives, mandate, and modalities of a GST. And these consultations are ongoing. They started in March in Geneva and has now moved to New York. The last meeting of these consultations will actually be tomorrow in New York. And based on these discussions, the UN Secretary General will issue a report where he will give options, as it said, on how to take this work forward within the UN. I assume that report will be out in August. That is up to the UN to see how quickly they can produce the report. Hopefully they can have it even earlier, but with vacations coming up, I assume it will be August. And then we will take a look at the report and see how we can take this work forward within the UN. And our aim is, of course, to establish such a GST so that we can get it started and it can get working. A similarity to the GST is from the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. So back in 1976, they started a group of science experts in Geneva that worked on, designing the verification regime of the CTBT. And this work was instrumental, for the negotiations of the CTBT. So when that was, negotiated in 1996, they were building on this, technical work that had been going on for 20 years. And our hope, of course, now we're not developing a verification regime for a treaty, but we are developing a toolbox of verification elements, technologies, methodologies, and so on. And this will be useful for future windows of opportunity for nuclear disarmament. And I think, this kind of shows that I call it the case for science diplomacy. I have started saying that science is immune to politics. That is probably not totally true, but hopefully it's to some extent true. And I think, it shows that even the GSE for the CTBT show that, science people can work together on technical, practical issues, even if there are political controversies between states. So when kind of the political side is blocked, I believe that science diplomacy is a good way to go to make sure that we still make some progress. And this is, it's about preparing for the future. It's about preparing for the next window of opportunity for nuclear disarmament, so that we can make sure that we can make most of it. So when again, and I'm confident that there will be, an opportunity for disarmament at some point again. Then there will not be, any stumbling blocks that we don't have the technical and procedural knowledge needed to make the most of it. And also, to have this is in the UN, the GSD is about preserving the knowledge, within the UN system, so that we make sure that we all states have access to it. And I think, also science work, the GST, the work we do on nuclear disarmament verification, it has a confidence building element, because you have states around the table that normally don't sit around the same table and work quite constructively together. So I do believe there is a strong confidence building element in this, even if, things doesn't look too great in the world today. Yeah, and finally, I would just highlight that at the MPT review conference in 2022, Norway had a working paper on science diplomacy. It's kind of describing the way we have been working, where we have a very tight cooperation between, the diplomat side and the science side. And this, very close cooperations makes us both stronger, because the experts get a better understanding, of the context and the policy side to it. And we are, better able to formulate our policy, because, we have a better understanding of the technical issues to it. So that was, what I wanted to share about the work that we have been undertaking, especially on nuclear disarmament verification. It is a bit, interesting to follow what the process within the UN, and we really hope that we will be able to move forward, on the work on our group on scientific and technical experts this fall. And I think even now, when times are difficult, this is one of the few areas where we actually can make some progress now, and this is progress that will benefit us in the future. So with that, I will stop my presentation and give it back to you, Dave.
So much. That was absolutely fascinating. Such a wealth of information, such a lot of interesting things. We have time now for some Q&A. So if you would like to ask a question, please do use the raise hand function and I will call on you. While people are gathering their thoughts, perhaps I could start off with one. I'd be interested to hear a bit more about the distinction between GGE and a GSTE. What's the difference? And if you're able to offer either a personal view or Norwegian official view on what's on the consultation, the subject of the consultation this year, I'd be really interested to hear that.
Sure. Should I just go on?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think, the distinction between a GGE and GST is that a GGE is more like a political level. So it's normally people like me, diplomats and political people that are participating in such a group. And that means that we don't have that deep technical knowledge about the issue, but we have more, the policy, the conceptual understanding of the work on nuclear disarmament verification. And we could see that with both the GG, it was mostly conceptual discussions, policy discussions, while the group, didn't have the technical capabilities, to really do the technical work. And it didn't have the time for that either. A GST, on the other hand, would be a group for technical people, for the scientists. So people like me should not be in that group. It should be people that have, been working within this field for many years, 10 years, have been publishing, have the right technical and practical background. But it's also important that all regions are able to participate. So we need to make sure that, also technical people from states that has not been working so much on nuclear disarmament verification could, be part of this to, be able to build capacities and be engaged in the work on nuclear disarmament verification. On the consultation, I would say they are quite positive, and I'm very confident that we will be able to move forward, with this GST. But of course, we have to have the final consultations tomorrow, and we also have to wait the report from the Secretary General before we can kind of conclude in any way. But thank you.
Thank you. We have a question in the chat from Tayaba. If you want to ask that on camera, Tayaba, you're very welcome to turn your camera on and ask the question verbally. I'll give you a moment if you do want to do that. Otherwise, I'll read the question out.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tayaba Khurshid, and I'm working as research officer at Center for International Strategic Studies. Sir, I wanted to ask that the recent SIPRI report highlight modernization of nuclear arsenals by all the nuclear weapons states. And as we have seen in the recent times, that the geopolitical competition is on the rise and the mistrust between nuclear powers has also grown rapidly. So how do you see the future of disarmament in the current geopolitical context?
Thank you for that question, and I think that's a very timely question. No, of course, it doesn't look good right now. I think we all see that the movement is going in the other direction, and it's more kind of the deterrence rhetorics that is kind of taking over a bit for the work on nuclear disarmament. But if we look a bit historically to this, we see that this has been going back and forth through the centuries, and going back to the 70s, early 80s. The future for nuclear disarmament didn't look good either, but then suddenly there was a window of opportunity in the 1990s, and we have to work, preparing ourselves that this will hopefully, and I believe it will happen again. So even if we are going into more difficult times now, on the other side of those times, there will hopefully be, time to again work for nuclear disarmament. There will be the right political will, because we need that. We need that from the nuclear weapons states. They must see their own, interest in actually working for nuclear disarmament. We don't see that now, but let's prepare, for when those times are back. That is kind of my attitude to that. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the question. We have a question from Sarah. Please go ahead.
Hi, Jørn. Thank you very much for the talk. I'm Sarah Al-Sayed. I'm a researcher with the Union of Concerned Scientists, and I'm also affiliated as guest with the Program on Science and Global Security at Princeton University. I have two questions, but they're small. The first one is there openness on the part of all states concerning the GSTE to admit in the group non-government affiliated scientific and technical experts? Because I would believe that maybe less democratic countries have their concerns. So I was wondering if you could speak a bit to that. The second question is, so if we assume that there are two camps, the nuclear risk reduction camp and the disarmament camp, with the understanding that nuclear risk reduction approaches are, if not antithetical to nuclear disarmament, at least contribute in their own way to stabilization of nuclear deterrence and putting obstacles in the way towards nuclear disarmament in terms of making it challenging to build trust rather than confidence, just confidence among states in the nuclear disarmament process. So if we assume this dichotomy to hold, I was wondering to what extent is the nuclear disarmament verification process of the UN, GGE, GSTE caught up in the nuclear risk reduction approach rather than genuine nuclear disarmament verification? So I was wondering if you could give us a sense of the prevailing spirit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sarah, for these great questions. Yes, about the openness to all states for GSD, that's an excellent question because, and that is what is being discussed, between the states at the UN. My attitude would be to have it as open as possible, but I think it needs to be controlled by the states actually, so it will be state nominations. The big challenge these days is that the UN is going through, strong cuts, reduction on initiatives, the UN 80 and so on, which makes it difficult to introduce new initiatives. It's not really the time for that. So with that in mind, we have actually proposed to limit the participation again to 25 participants, and that is, mainly, of cost reducing reasons, because it's very hard to get anything through the UN now that would be too costly. But what I hope we are able to achieve is to have some kind of rotation so that all states that are interested are able to participate at some point. But again, this is, under discussion, and I can't really conclude or, know what the conclusion will be in the end, because that will be based on a discussion with all the UN member states. As for the nuclear disarmament versus, nuclear risk reduction, I think, it's also a very good question, but I think, I think we're coming a bit from other side on that, because we don't see that as two camps in a way. We see nuclear risk reduction as one of the important elements for nuclear disarmament. And we believe, that, and I do understand that work on risk reduction can be used, as an excuse to not do more on disarmament. The focus will be on strategic stability and not, getting the numbers down. But at the same time, to get the numbers down, I think, we have to go through some kind of risk reduction measures between the weapon states that can build confidence and kind of allow for this confidence between the states to be able to move forward. Because at the end of the day, it is the states with nuclear weapons that has to do the reductions. So we can't really do it for them. And then that's why, I think from, a purely pragmatic point of view, we would need some nuclear risk reduction this year to get there. That being said, our work on nuclear disarmament verification, I see it very much within the framework of nuclear disarmament, because it's, one of the key principles for nuclear disarmament. So we need to make sure to fill it with content and make it operational, so that, nuclear disarmament will be as, efficient and effective as possible when it's, again, possible to have some nuclear disarmament. So thank you for very good questions.
Quick questions, and there are some more. We have one in the chat from Natalia, who cannot turn on her mic. Her question is, do you consider some regional verification experiences, such as ABACC, that's the bilateral Argentine-Brazilian verification arrangements, can translate its expertise in verifying the peaceful uses of nuclear energy into the verification of nuclear disarmament?
Yeah, I can start with that one. Thank you, Natalia, for raising that one, because we are working, in partnership with Brazil on this GSD on nuclear disarmament verification. And they are, of course, very much coming from the context of ABAC. And my good colleagues at the Brazilian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, really highlight how important ABAC was for building confidence between Argentina and Brazil. And it's kind of a very good example what, verification can, if not lead to, but at least, support. So my understanding is that ABAC has been, very instrumental for building, the good relations and confidence between Argentina and Brazil. And of course, these are important insights and elements that will go into, the continued work on nuclear disarmament verification. And we have also, Norway, been supporting the British NGO think tank, Vertic, that has been building regional hubs for nuclear disarmament verification. And one of those is in Latin America, and it's mainly Argentina, Brazil, that has kind of been leading this discussion there. Of course, with also including out of the perspectives from ABAC. So definitely ABAC is important. Thank you.
Great. We have a question in the chat from Griffiths. Griffiths, I don't know if you want to put your question verbally. If not, I'm happy to read it out for you. The question was, is AI being integrated into NDV systems? If so, how is it being done, and what are the ethical concerns?
Very good question, and very difficult. This is not, my field of expertise, but this is definitely something that the expertise community is looking at, how we can use AI in nuclear disarmament verification. I think, in the information gathering, it seems like there should be a good room to find good use of integrating IA. But of course, I have to be careful here, because this is not really my field of expertise, artificial intelligence. And it hasn't been done that much work on it, but it is something that is coming up. It is something, that the technical and the academic community is looking at. But at the same time, the use of IA is also being discussed on more general level within the UN on, about how to regulate and how to understand it. So I think, there is a lot of conversations that has just started on the multilateral level here, that we are still, lagging a little bit behind in seeing how we can use this and what are the limitations. So that is the best I can offer on that one at this point. But thank you
for the question and the answer. I think we have time for one more, and there is a hand up. MD Arifur Rahman, if you'd like to pose your question, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation, and it's very fascinating. So I'd like to ask a very quick question, is that from your experience or understanding, do you think IAEA is actually capable for the future disarmament verification, or should we actually have like a new institution that should handle the disarmament verification in the future?
Thank you. Thank you for that question, Arthur. And I think you're kind of hitting something that has a lot of political interest. We had that discussion in the last GG. We spent quite a lot of time on it, and it's something that experts don't really agree on. But I think what we all agree on is that the IAEA has relevant competences for the work on nuclear disarmament verification. So there is a lot of learning lessons from the IAEA that should be integrated into future work on nuclear disarmament verification. If we at some point have a multilateral institution that will, oversee nuclear disarmament verification, it would have to be an agreement between the states if this should be integrated into the IAEA, or if it should, be a separate entity. As it looks now, there are quite a lot, and I would say maybe especially nuclear weapon states are quite skeptical against, having it within the IAEA. While other states point to the fact that, the IAEA has already been, involved in this kind of work. The Trilateral Initiative is one example. And also the South African nuclear weapons program is a good example on IAEA engagements. So I think, the answer to that is kind of actually a bit a political answer. So it's up to what the states can agree on. But on the technical side, I would say, the IAEA don't have all the capacities needed. So you would need to develop some more for the disarmament phase of it, the war and dismantlement and all that. The IAEA don't have, capabilities on that. So there would be a need to develop, new areas for the agency if they were, to take this work. So yeah, it's an open question. It's an important question because it goes to the institutional arrangement. But I think that is some discussions that will, come up in the future as well. So thank you for taking interest in that.
very much, and those were all excellent questions, very pertinent. I think that brings us to the end today. It's just for me to thank everybody for attending, but particularly, of course, thank Jørn for giving his time and insights and answering all the questions. I should also, of course, thank formally the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who've supported our work at the EVN and this masterclass in particular. Very much appreciated. We will be having another masterclass in a few weeks' time, where our colleagues will be talking about their NPT monitor projects. Details for that will go out soon. Thank you all very much, and please enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you all, and thank you for having me and the questions. Thank you.